Okay, today we're going to look at brainwaves and how brainwaves change to fit the environment. And recently I came up with 3 stages: the confusion stage, distraction stage, and sensitization stage in the last few months regarding organized stalking, group stalking, gang stalking, whatever you want to call it. But behavior is a reaction to stimuli within the environment, and environmental psychology plays a big role into an individual's behavior. And high emotional states have to do with how people are perceived when they're going through group stalking. Sometimes individuals act out irrationally, or they're confused, they don't know what's going on, and the way they're perceived, they look as though they're confused or crazy or whatnot, but the overall environment is leading up to that. And this has to do with psychological health, intellectual health, emotional health, behavioral health, spiritual health, and then individual interactions, social interactions, and of course environmental interaction. Now, for instance, if an individual walks out of their house and goes to the store or goes across town, and on their way they encounter several people who wear a particular color clothing, and these individuals act like hostile towards them, look at them in strange ways, behave irrationally towards the individual themselves is going to perceive their reality in a completely different way. And this carries on day to day, making it almost like a permanent type of lifestyle for the individual, as to even if they come across somebody who has nothing to do with it, they may interpret it as it has something to do with it, but in actuality, most individuals are participating in it, to what degree or not. Now, you have something called psychological reflex. So I want to give this an example. Most individuals that I speak to have communicated to me that they keep getting followed by people with red shirts, and there's an emotional connotation on that, what I put into the distraction stage of what you call gang stalking. Whereas these individuals just aren't following an individual, but they're acting out like hostility, or they're wearing something else that's symbolic to the individual of their own emotional life. Like, for instance, say the individual went to a certain college. Well, the person following them will wear a red shirt and then wear a hat of the college they went to. Or they'll have somebody in the car who looks like somebody they know, yada, yada, yada. And so after they see this red color following them so many different times, now they create a psychological reflex as to where, they're hanging out with their family somewhere, or they're at their workplace or whatnot. Somebody walks into the room wearing a red shirt, whatnot, and the person's doing what most targets of gang stalking call, an assignment or whatever, where they're working for a neighborhood watch group or a store watch group, or no matter how the individual is contracted to participate into it. Just by them being there, they're participating in the overall orchestration, and it's creating a psychological reflex. The person's saying, oh my God, this has happened to me so many different times in so many different ways. Noise campaigns, people putting objects in their yard, individuals following me around with the brights on their car all day, yada, yada. All that is incorporated into that one little thing that person did. So everything that you experienced before that is incorporated into that. So they come into the room with the red shirt, bam, you have a psychological reflex. Your memory sees that, and it corresponds with everything else that happened before that. All the other stuff everybody did participating in this stuff, before that you see that, bam, it goes like that. And so that is definitely changes the brain waves, and it changes the environment. And then you have 2 choices. You're going to adapt or adjust to it. And individuals adapt to these things and adjust to these things in different ways. Some individuals become isolated. They don't ever go outside their house. Some individuals kill themselves. Some individuals kill other people. Some individuals end up on drugs. Some individuals just really never figure out what's going on. They go into some sort of psychosis and they never come out of it. And then I'm going to speak how colors are cross-connected with sound. So you have something called a noise campaign. And I break the sound down into 2 areas, synthetic and natural. So say I'm somewhere hanging out and somebody's walking by with a red shirt, and now somebody on the other, somebody in a parking lot, coordinated together, purposely timed and coordinated together. Somebody's going to come outside and start slamming the car door, or set off an alarm, or play loud music, and then I'm going to see the red shirt That's sight. That's visual. This is a visual thing. It's a person wearing red. I'm seeing it. That's visual. Color perception. Red naturally brings out aggressiveness and fear. They may pick a person who looks a certain sort of way to add the emotional connotation onto it. Next thing you know, somebody's slamming a door in the parking lot right there at the same time, or playing loud music. So now I got sight and sound, and so now that has damaged my perception of reality to some degree. So an individual fluctuating and moving through reality is going to experience this over and over and over and over again, and it never lets up. And then the cars with the brightening, yada yada yada. Then you add the mimic effect in there, and that's incredible. How you can meet somebody and talk to them, and if you show a liking for them, they will actually go out and contract other people who look like that person, and especially hire that person. So the mind is going through a rapid series of events that creates overstimulation. And most people who have not gone through this have an average stimulation in their environment or understimulation, but the mental functions create an overstimulation. And so your mind is trying to figure out what's going on. Your mind is trying to process, and it's almost too much. It's a bombardment of your reality. It's like a hostile invasion, a takeover. Now, in the Soviets back in the 1960s had something called a LIDA machine, L-I-D-A. And a LIDA machine created psychotronic warfare, but it used visual, seeing light and sound. And the LIDA machine, evidence showed that it created an induced drug-like effect on the person going through it. So the Soviets would test, bring somebody into a laboratory, use sound and light on them over and over and over again in a laboratory setting. And it showed that, hey, this really messed up the person's mind and made it, they went through induced hallucinations almost from the effects. So if you're going through your environment and you've seen all these cars with brights on it and whatnot, and houses turning their lights on at specific times, it's the same sort of effect as what the Soviets figured out with the LIDA machine. And so you gotta think, what would be the purpose of that? A bunch of lights following people around? First of all, you gotta ask, can't somebody go blind from that? But other than that, what would be the purpose of an individual experiencing repeated flashing of lights throughout their day, repeatedly? So you see, this gets into definitely, it gets into changing the person's perception of their reality greatly. Now, Pavlov's dog. That's a very good example. Pavlov's dog. How Pavlov would feed his dog and ring a bell, and then after so long, he would ring a bell, and he wouldn't even eat food. And the dog would just start, foaming at the mouth, waiting for the food, yada, yada. That's a lot what's going on here with gang stalking. Now, there's 5, alpha, beta, delta, theta, gamma. Those are some of the brainwaves that people have. Now, there was some testing done to war veterans, and 85% of the war veterans had post-traumatic stress disorder. And out of those people with post-traumatic stress disorder, their main brainwave frequency was alpha frequency. And so there's a great connotation on post-traumatic stress disorder and brainwave frequency, and again, dealing with gang stalking and dealing with the color perception and directed energy weapons that individual goes to. This has to do with neuro-linguistic programming, and so it does capture a person and puts them in their mind in a sort of a zombie-like state. I would say a zombie-like state. Now, oftentimes individuals have said, well, can't the person ignore it, or can't the person get therapy or help? It's so sophisticated, an individual has no choice but to face it and deal with it, especially if they go through it on a high level, on a high scale, because, believe it or not, this works through the observance of an individual through the sky, through aerial view, through drones or satellites or whatnot. So an individual is observed every single second of the day, and that's how the gang stalking is coordinated. So if an individual goes into a grocery store or they go over to a friend's house, they will have exit entries. Basically, you walk out of your house, 3 other people walk out of their house at the same time, or pull cars out of their driveway at the same time, or come into their home or into their house at the same time. And so there has to be an aerial view to coordinate that, and that's exactly what's going on. So this is an experience where you feel like you have no control over the situation at all. You don't know what's going on. People who start going through this, they're in the confusion stage, they have no idea what's going on. And then if they do get a grasp over it, they feel as though they have no control over their environment. And that creates a really that creates an individual to have low performance in their life. Low performance at work, low performance at school. They feel they have no control over their environment. People are running around with lights and colors and creating noise. And then the people they come across are hostile. Like, I remember I can walk down a street and the individuals participating in what we call gang stalking, whether they go through these neighborhood watch groups, you know, all they got to do is follow the little app on their phone and know where to follow you. They will be hiring these individuals to look at you in certain sorts of ways. And it creates an individual that is almost unstable. You know, that's how most individuals feel when they go through. They feel unstable. You see individuals, they just look at you, like trying to provoke a response out of you. Look at you in an angry way, or a way in which, trying to get you off center, get you off your square, so to speak. And so the average individual going through that is going to be placed in what I like to call arrested development, as to which everywhere they go, everybody's doing it. They're worried about what just happened, what's currently happened, what's going to happen in the future. So it really creates, like I said, a zombie-like environment, a zombie-like mindset. That's exactly what they do, is try to create zombies. Yeah, a perceived loss of control encourages anxiety and distress. Again, so if you perceive your environment, you have a loss of control in it, it's going to encourage anxiety and stress. Most assuredly, most definitely. And then, I'm going to be frank with people. So you're walking the streets, and then there's other people out there going around hiring people. So before you get to an area, there's people already there waiting for you. And just to go into an area and see that there's people there waiting for you, all wearing the same color, or, doing street theater and doing this strange stuff, it's just a really bizarre way of life. Why would you, and then you have people from all walks of life. Some of these people are on drugs. Some of these people, I don't see any real rational purpose for it to begin with, but it just creates a real strange type of atmosphere. So again, how your environment changes, your perception changes, and that changes your biology. Again, your brain waves, your brain chemistry. It changes the way you interact with your family members, the people around you, and how I'm looking for certain notes that I had. How you would come off to people might be strange or unusual or whatever, but you got to think this is an individual who is bombarded 24/7. I'm going through these notes looking for certain notes. So it's basically a setup. Breaking it down is basically a setup. You have people coordinating your activity through technology. You have people creating, noise, yelling at specific times outside your home, or following you around yelling, or like slamming doors, car alarms, natural noise, synthetic noise, visual, people and objects. People actually put objects in their yard or carry things with them, or they even use the cars, man. People will park their cars just based on color. They'll find people who have specific car colors. And it's all done through technology to orchestrate this, and you have the teams doing it. So it's pretty much a setup. It's an environmental setup, and the individual doesn't know what's going on. And then people are naturally hostile to the individual. And so the whole thing is a big psychological harassment campaign. And then an individual will want relief from that. And I always encourage people to try to find a place, maybe go camping or go in the woods, or just retreat into your home for a while and then come back out. But then I came up with the concept of telling the people what's going on. In June of 2016, I came up with that, and so I utilized that, and that was effective to a large degree. I would say definitely that this is social weaponry. That's what I would consider it as. I would say, like with the Soviet Lyta machine, instead of taking people into a laboratory, they just use the person's environment. They just use people with, you know, lights on their cars and whatnot, and colors and whatnot. So it's definitely, it's basically a form of mind control in a way. Yeah. And so getting back to what I was saying, confusion stage, distraction stage, sensitization stage, the emotional connotation that's placed on things. Most people don't recognize who are a lot of people who are participating in this, the ones who do it the most definitely know, but a lot of people don't know. People are only being picked because of their hair color, or because of how they look, or because of how their car looks. People are being financed to follow the individual for only the purpose of messing with their mind, placing an emotional connotation on it. So if I get into an argument with a certain type of individual, now through the networking of what has been called gang stalking, which a gang is only 3 people, so if 3 or more people are stalking you, you're being gang stalked. That's all it means. That's all gang stalking means. If you're being stalked by 3 or more people, you're being gang. That's all it means. So an individual will be financed based on how they look. So I get an argument with a person, now this person's following me around, yada yada, or they hire other people who look like that person. Those people may actually feel like they're doing something in their community or something that's beneficial to somebody. They may actually come up with the impression that they're actually helping somebody, are preventing you from doing something, but their only role is to participate in this overall orchestration. That's it. There's nothing else there for them. Like that's it. That's all it is. And I think people have trouble getting that. Like they don't, you know, I mean, that's it. But, you know, not being mean or anything, but that's just what it is. And so I've developed a series. I've developed a series of you know, courses for people, like going up to the people and talking to them, or the people distancing themselves from this activity, like taking a break for a couple of weeks, or people call me all the time. Now, I've spoken to over 100 different people going through what you call gang stalking. And so I've spoken to people all over the world. Like recently I spoke to a woman from the Ukraine. She speaks 3 languages, Ukrainian, English, and Italian. And she told me, she said the exact same things that you're saying through your YouTube channel about helping people is the exact same thing that's happening to me in my life. I've been having people following me around wearing red when I leave my house. Like children are being instructed to run towards my car, and they're wearing red shirts and stuff like that. And so it's like the interpretation that I give out is being picked up by people like on the other side of the world that don't even speak the same language as me, and they all know what I'm talking about. And so that's, you know, that's confirmed for me that I'm pretty, you know, hands-on with my courses. But so people call me, like one guy, he was going down by the train tracks, actually stand in front of a train to kill himself because he did not want to deal with what was happening to him in his life. And so there's people who call me who are suicidal. There's people who call me who may be violent. There's people who call me who just don't know what to do. They want relief. And 70% of the people who go through it are women. Most of them are women who are single mothers. And so, you know, people have come to me and said, this is happening to me. I've seen you explaining this stuff, and I would like some information you make some information available. Are you listening to my story? Nobody else will listen to me. People think there's something wrong with me. I need help. And so in a weird way, most people have explained to me that this is happening to them in their neighborhood through like their neighborhood watch group is doing it to them or whatever, or it's happening to them through their company, the company they work at. So in its own way, it's like I've actually, for these people, I've actually become their watch group to help them in a strange way. But. So there's something called a learned helplessness, and I think most people going through anything like this acquire a feeling of feeling helpless. And it's a pretty awkward feeling when you see people who, maybe your family members are people who work with you, are people, even people like, there's people on drugs. And not to put anybody down, I grew up with people who, I know people who use drugs. I know people who, sell drugs on a small scale. They're not necessarily bad people, but when you see people who are on drugs and people involved in that lifestyle, you're like, what is going on? Like, why are people who should be working, real jobs and providing for their family and stuff, why are these people involved in that? Like, it doesn't really, the person who goes through this acquires what you call a learned helplessness. They say everybody's in on it, everybody's a part of it, and the churches networks through churches, all these different groups are involved in it, and the person feels as though they don't have any courage in their life, they have a low performance, and they just don't know what they're just out for the count. And so my whole thing has been to give people what I call education on gang stalking to some degree, and by no means I'm not an expert on that subject, gang stalking, but I have slowly become an expert on the target's approach to it. And so I've given people different examples that they can do in their environment, how they can talk to people and communicate it to them in different ways. If you're being covertly drugged, instead of going to a restaurant, why don't you go to a buffet? I've given that advice to people. That's helped people a lot. And there are people being covertly drugged. At one period, it happened to me. And I used to actually have to go in there and talk to the manager about it before I bought the food because I didn't want to be drugged. And the feeling of it was horrible. I remember feeling like people always say, you say you're drugged, can you describe it? You feel like you're going to pass out, real lightheaded, dizzy. Like one time I thought I was actually going to die. I didn't know what the drugs were. So I was like, man, this is bad. I don't know. And these were like good restaurants, right? And so it's incredible. Like you can be walking down. I remember one time I was drugged at a restaurant and I walked back like 15 miles home, and the whole way cars would come off the street and drive towards me like they were going to run me over, and then pull away at the last minute, like a few feet down there, and pull away like that. And that was a big thing that would happen, is everywhere I went, I'd be walking down the street and cars would like literally go all the way off the road and just zoom towards me like this, like they were going to run me over, and then pull away. And then I ended up dating a girl for a couple months who she showed me on her phone how she was getting alerts sent to her phone, and those alerts would communicate to her where to go, to drive by, to follow me throughout the day. And it was like the Google Map type app type deal, and so she knew where to follow me to, where to drive by me. And then people would be telling her like you got to watch him and wear this color when they'd tell her what colors to wear, and it would be like a psychological thing to where they would have people like drive in the car with her, like a thing like, oh, now this girl is doing this to you, and now she's with other guys, so this is a slam on you, this is a bad thing on you. And I'm just like, man, this is like pitiful. Like what? Like, wow, like that's, like people are going to go that far out of their life to do something like that? Like that doesn't make any sense. And so, so adjustment to your environment, you got to adjust to these things and get used to dealing with them. Changing the stimulus itself to influence cognitive appraisal and effective response. That's very important. So I've had to change the way I perceive people, and that's been a big thing to me, because sometimes you don't want to look at people in certain ways, but then you learn like, man, if I hang out with that person, are these weird people are like these weird sick people gonna come and pay them to like if I hang out with a girl, are these weird people gonna come pay her to drive around with other guys and stuff like that just to try to like mess with my mind? I'm like, I don't want to go through that. You know what I mean? I'm like, I don't like what like it's like it's not like I have 100 women following me around, but if I talk to a couple of them, they actually pay the women to do that, and I'm just like, it's sick, it's weird, I don't get it. I educate on the subject, and I get it because I've been going through it for 3 years, but I don't get why an individual should have to live like that. It makes no real sense. And and then again, some of these people won't even be, not trying to drag it out, but I was seeing this girl, and I was like, the girl didn't even have a driver's license or a license plate on her car, and she was like drunk half the time. And I'm just like, what the hell? And then they would give her other cars, excuse my language, and they would put her in the car with all these other cars also. I'd be like, oh man, what's going on? But so the desperatism in people's lives is very high, and for an individual who's watching this from the outside, if you're not the individual experiencing it, you really don't know what the person's going through. It is way more sophisticated and way more troubling than you can ever imagine. And there's people who lose their wife, they lose their husband, people have relationship with their children has been destroyed, they lose their job. There's people who literally kill themselves. I had a man call me, he lived in Washington, D.C., and this had been happening to him for 15 years, and he lost his wife, he lost everything, man, and he said, before I kill myself, I want to talk to somebody and tell my story. And he was scared. He wouldn't even go out and eat at a restaurant. He said, every time I go out, my food's being drugged, people are using directed energy weapons on me, yada, yada, yada. And so, I was just like, okay, I'm going to talk to him. And for 2 nights, I talked to him, and there was another woman who helped me talk to him. I got like a whole phone of people who go through this. Like I said, I've spoken to well over 100 different people for hours and hours and hours. And so I talked to him for 2 nights, and then I never heard back from him again. So I don't know if he killed it. I don't know if he's dead or alive or not. I didn't even know his name. I just knew his first name. And so this is the type of stuff that people are going through. Their whole lives are being systematically destroyed. And, my education on gang stalking has actually saved people's lives. There's like 8 different people, at least 8 people, who told me that it hadn't been for me, they'd be dead. There's other people out there who've called me, and I think, they may be dead. I don't know. But, it's... So now I want to go into post-traumatic stress disorder triggers. Now, how your brain waves change to fit your environment. Now, through sound is used a lot, like slamming doors at specific times. And so, because you're being watched at all times, and they're coordinating the psychological harassment into watching you through geospatial technology. Anybody can buy space on a satellite or a drone. So through geospatial technology, you're being observed and being watched. And so if you get up and walk from one area of your house to another, somebody in the area may actually turn the music on their car at a specific time. Be on call, whether you do it. Or you're walking down the street, you get to an area, somebody just slams their door. Now, you're not talking about 1 or 2 times. You're talking about going through, some people go through something like this like 15 times a day. And then you're dealing with all this other stuff going on simultaneously. And so it creates, like I said, an involuntary stimulus. It creates post-traumatic stress, as to which you can be sitting down somewhere and then somebody slams their door. And it's not just that one time they slam it. Your mind is gonna recall every other time that door was slammed. And this is something called auto-suggestion and whatnot. So they repeatedly do it over and over and over again. And so you're sitting somewhere and somebody slams the door and you're just, like that, right? Almost like you watch the Vietnam War, how Vietnam War vets have to hide under their bed during the 4th of July, or other Iraqi war vets or whatever. So there's people out there who've been through traumatic experiences in combat, and so they will actually go under their bed during the 4th of July again. And so because of the gunshots, they're not doing that because people are shooting the guns. They're doing that out of, a learned helplessness, of the environmental stimuli. It's a natural response. They don't even think about it. They hear a firecracker go off, boom, they hit the ground, right? And so that's what's going on with this gang stalking stuff, is just triggering people. Somebody walks into the room, 3 people come around them and start messing with them. Their mind is recalling all the other experiences they had with that. And so, that's real. That's what's going on. And it's being organized by technology. So then there's the thing of people hearing voices. Now, I've had some really strange dreams, but I've never heard any voices. But I know there's people out there who are actually going through what you call voice-to-skull technology. Now, I've had numerous people contact me and explain to me that they have heard voices, and I've done some research into this. And on the sub-audio level, there is, through psychotronics and through acoustic technology, there are people making people hear voices through a sub-audio level. Now, the technology is not anything new. It's old technology. Like in 1974, there was a newspaper article released that talked about voice-to-skull technology. And the Soviets were working on this stuff way back in like the 50s, 60s. The KGB had a paranormal department, which they worked with psychotronic weapons, voice-to-skull technology, ESP. And actually the theta brainwaves are closely related to ESP. So the KGB had a whole department full of this stuff. And so you have to think, the Soviet curtain fell in the late 80s, and when the Soviet curtain fell, all these people who worked for the KGB and were KGB agents, they didn't have work anymore. The Soviet government would finance these people. Like if you lived in the Soviet Union and you were a government official, you could go anywhere you wanted. The government paid for everything. That's how the Soviet government rolled. And so when the Iron Curtain fell, these people didn't have jobs anymore. They were out on the streets. Where are they going to make money? Where are they going to get an income? What are they going to do? So they took their knowledge, they took their information, they took their sophisticated technical abilities, and they went out and contracted their services to foreign governments and to foreign groups. Some of these people became terrorists. They created terrorist organizations. So there's individuals out there who have this technology and who have knowledge on this stuff and who have these capabilities, and they'll use, they'll find somebody who will use them and use their services. So, it's not to be taken lightly if you hear somebody claiming that they're hearing voices, and you got to think, is this person actually delusional, or is there something else going on here? Most people like myself who explained a subject like gang stalking, I'm at a disadvantage because the public has very little education or knowledge on how these things work or that these sorts of things exist. And so I'm explaining this to people who haven't had any thinking on the subject already. And, they may have seen it in movies, but they have not done any reading upon it. And so, I would recommend that people go out and just, you can go to the library and get a library card and read some books. That'd be beautiful if people just go read a book about it, learn about it, and there's radio interviews. There's people out there who that's not psychotronic weapons. I'm not an authority on that, but there's people out there who you could go to and get information, and and learn, and learning is fundamental. It may change your life. And so again, now a lot of the people who go through gang stalking. This creates something called excitement and inhibition, in which, a lot of people lose excitement in life and they don't know what to do. And so, that's why I like my courses. Like, man, I started getting gang stalked in the summer of 2015. I went through a whole year of it, and in the spring of 2016, I just started saying, you know what, I'm not doing this no more. I started going up to the people and talking to them and telling them I was being gang stalked. And so I became excited about that. I'm like, wow, man, you know, there's people out there like actually going through this too, and there's a whole system out there doing this to people. And so I created these little courses. So that's something I'm excited about. Hey, man, I get followed by all these people. Every girl I talk to gets used against me about that. So now I have excitements in my life. I have something in my life I can enjoy. You know, now I'm educating people on this. And because the aggravation is so high. I remember one time I spoke to a woman for hours on the phone, and she said, you know what, I'm coming to pick you up. And I said, okay, you're coming to pick me up. And then before she got to me, I believe it was through her job, her workplace, somebody actually came to her and told her some sort of disinformational story, or however they contracted her, which is basically propaganda, and to follow me around. And I'm like thinking, man, wait a minute, this is a woman who liked me. Like, this is somebody who actually liked me and wanted to be around me. And some weird, strange people who I don't even know are going to come and what's up with that? And that's just how you live. For most people don't get that. That's how I've been living for 3 years. And, you know, it's incredible. And then I'm out in the world walking around, and then people are looking at me. People hear me saying something like gang stalking, and then they think I'm the one who's confused, or I'm the one who's crazy, or I'm delusional, or I don't understand. No, you don't understand. You're the one who's delusional. You're the one who's miseducated. You're the one who is wrong. You know? So you know, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So I just want people to get that you know, as you're being gang stalked, as you move through your environment, you're being observed through an aerial view. The people in your area, if they have red and black cars, they're going to be networked to get involved through all kinds of different networks. Compartmentalized different networks are used. Sophisticated stalking. And people will actually be prepped on what color shirts to wear. Like, they will actually find people who you know and tell them to wear this shirt and say, like, I'll give an instant example. I go over to somebody's house. There's some chick or something that I like. I start talking to her. Next thing you know, these people come to this woman, and it'll have her driving down the street in a car with another guy and wearing red shirts or blue shirts or what have you not. The colors can change. And then they're supposed to look at me or something. See, that's psychological harassment. But so these people but the way they're being contracted is through all different sorts of means. It's different people, different stories, different ways they're approached, and it's a network doing it. And so as I move through the land, this is following me and doing this to me within a certain mile radius. And so you got to imagine this happens every single day. All these different people and colors and street theaters where they act out themes. People actually get together in a group and do little plays and stuff like that. You know, you got to think about living like that every single day for 3 years. 3 years. What's the purpose of that? What's the purpose of that? You got to think about this stuff realistically. And so that's why I do the work I do. I feel it's very important, and it helps a lot of people. And there's people out there who know me. They understand what's happening to me. And there's people who donated money to me. And there's people I give advice to. And, you know, I'm really interested in the psychology behind this. It's getting into an area where it's not so much just the individual who's going through it, but also the individuals who are agreeing to participate in it. Some of the people who participate in it, it does end up happening to them. They're being watched and they're being listened to. All their phone calls are being listened to. And so a lot of these people, it ends up happening to them. I think a lot of these individuals are under what you call remote neural monitoring. And that's an interesting subject. If you don't know what remote neural monitoring is, you should look into it. And so it's almost like some sort of, remote the electrochemical stimulate. They stimulate electrochemically. They induce the person's mind and they change the person's perception without them knowing about it. It can happen to them when they're asleep, when they're awake, whatever. But this whole thing is some sort of chemistry, I call body chemistry. Colors and directed energy weapons and covert druggings and all this stuff and whatnot. You mix all that stuff together, you got that's a very serious recipe, very serious. Then again, you can go look at the old. You don't even have to look towards the Soviet Union. You can go look at the old MK Ultra files, which I like to call Mein Kampf Ultra myself. But you can go look at those. That has to do with behavioral science. Dr. Delgado, Dr. Jose Delgado, which worked with monkeys, putting chips in the monkeys' minds and whatnot. There was a film that came out with Christopher Walken, which aired on television. It didn't air at the theaters. It only aired on television. It's called Mind Snatchers, and Christopher Walken is a really good actor. In that film, it showed how he came out of the Vietnam War. It was a 70s film, but he came home from the Vietnam War. He went in some sort of medical hospital, and it showed how the monkeys' minds were being messed with. They were putting chips in monkeys' heads and whatnot, and then they started messing with his mind. Dr. Jose Delgado is famous for that, and he has a whole book out there on that subject. Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, Dr. Ewan Cameron. There's a whole there's dozens of them. That's just the work in America. Now this is coming out of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, starting back in '53 with the mind control experiments, MK Ultra mind control experiments, which made it all the way to Congress in the late 70s, and so congressional hearing on that, and so in late 70s, I think it started in the early 70s maybe, but it's famous in the late 70s. And so, you can study into these subjects and learn about them and learn, a historical lesson from it. But this stuff is still happening today in different sorts of ways. People's minds are still being messed with. And so, I'm a person where if I'm walking the streets and I see somebody, I don't mind speaking to them if they speak to me, being polite and being kind and whatnot. But I don't think it is in the best interest of the people, whatever place they live, to participate in this, because you're dealing with people who don't know what's going on, people who are having electronic weapons used on them, being drugged, their minds are being messed with. I think there's a lot of people dead behind this. There's people killing themselves. I think there's people killing other people. And it's not being said because nobody knows what's happening. The person doesn't know what's going on. They're being taunted, so to speak. And fear is a big part of this. People are trying to put them in states of fear. And I think that's dangerous because humans are animals. And if you put a raccoon in a corner, they act out violently. And if you psychologically put an individual into a corner, and again, you got drugs and electronic weapons and all this stuff, caught the color perception, brain waves and all this stuff, the individual may, go and get a machine gun or something and go on a rampage. I think it's dangerous. I don't think it. I think if something like this should be done, it should be done with the individual agreeing to it. I think an individual should agree to this, but so it is a reality. It's something that's happening, and that's why I do the work I do. To keep people from having to act out in those sorts of ways, and they can. So, I work in saving lives. I've saved people's lives. There's people who've gone all the way to the United Nations and haven't got help, and they've had to come to me for help, and so I feel that the work I do is very important. But other than that. I encourage people to do more. I think education on gang stalking should be done not just for the people who are going through it, but I think people who are participating in it should know something about it. I would want to know, if you want me to mess with somebody and follow somebody who's being drugged and all this different stuff, I'd want to know something about what's going on to him. You know, it's a safety thing. You mean you want me to do this, and this guy's being drugged and electronic? You know, I don't. What? You know, I think it is responsible for people to have some sort of knowledge on this subject. That's how I feel about it. Yeah. And then, you know, I react to it in different sorts of ways, and you know, I have issues with sometimes, you know, I like to drink and stuff like that, but I have posts, you know, I got problems, man. I've been going through this for 3 years, you know. A cold beer doesn't hurt me. But, so, I want to leave people with that. Now, my email address is rareartofsociety@gmail.com. R-A-R-E, rareartofsociety@gmail.com. And the people who are getting gang stalked, usually what I do is I talk to the person for like 2-3 hours and just let them talk and talk and talk and talk. Now, the problem with that is because I've spoken to a lot of different targets of gang stalking, and because it's happened to me, I think it's made the person vulnerable to other people listening to them and stuff. So I don't like, my phone has become a thing to where I don't even like to get. I'm more, you know, I think me meeting people, if somebody actually truly needs help, I'd rather talk to them in person. Over the phone is good to a degree to get the person to a state to where they feel comfortable and confident in themselves, and they will not result in you know, any type of malicious behavior or harming themselves, or, you know, possibly end up on drugs or something. But these are individual, you know, you may be losing your home or going through a crisis. So, you know, I've set up something like a 3-week type course to where I can teach people everything they need to know within a 3-week period. And so that's something that I'm proud of, is I got that out there. 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, I can help an individual get the knowledge they need to move. It won't be the end of the knowledge. You know, you're always learning. Knowledge is a never-ending thing. So, but after that 3 weeks, that person will be on their own journey in that way. So, Rare Art of Society, RAREOFSOCIETY@gmail.com. And if you are somebody who is participating in gang stalking, and because there's people who getting gang stalked who contacted me. There was a woman, this was a long time ago, but there's a woman who was given $100 at a shopping mall, and 2 men approached her and gave her a $100 bill and recruited her and said that they need her to follow another man around and change her hair color and follow him with the brights on the car. She didn't really get what was going on necessarily, and so she didn't know who the men were who hired her. She didn't even know who they were. And she contacted me and said that she discovered she was involved with gang stalking, and she said she was afraid to talk about it over her phone. She emailed me. I'm sure she probably emailed me through like a library or something, and she said she was afraid to speak about it over the telephone, and she didn't want it to happen to her. She didn't know if somebody would harm her for telling what she knew about it. And I said, well, you know, how do they contact you? She said now they contact me through a 1-800 number. So they met her in person, gave her $100, and then they contacted her through a 1-800 Stop Smoking advertisement, and that would be her cue to get the instructions. And she said, I know they're listening to all my phone calls now, and they're watching me and stuff, and I don't know what to do, Jamil, and I'm scared. And I said, well, you know, you can come talk to me if you want to. And she really didn't have enough money. She was in a hole. She was far away, but she could have came if she wanted to, but she was still far away, and she didn't have that much money. And I thought to myself, you know, that's really interesting. You're changing your hair color and you're stalking a man with lights on your car, and you feel what you're doing is wrong, and you don't want to do it, but you're going to keep doing it. That to me sounds like a hostage situation. It doesn't sound like a job. It sounds like slave labor. So, you know, there's people who've contacted me about gang stalking. I've had individuals on the streets tell me a little bit about it. And the way they come across is a lot of these people do not feel they're doing something legitimate. They don't feel they're doing something moral. And you know, I would advise people, you know, if you're participating in it and you want to contact me, you feel free to. I have no problem with that. You know, if you could have some information that could help me and help other people, that'd be beautiful. You know, and of course your name would be your name would be confidential. You know, but yeah, if I had a source of information to be helpful, you know, everybody's welcome. I don't care. You know, I'm type of everybody's welcome. I don't care who you are. But okay, so yeah, we covered everything that I think that we can cover. And so I just encourage people to pursue their education and get into, and you know, I've gone into basically environmental psychology, and now I listen to like debates, people, Cornell debating Harvard and stuff like that, and just listening, you know, on technology and how technology works, and you know, different sort, and you know, it's an interesting transition. I went from randomly approaching the gang stalkers on the streets to environmental psychology and whatnot, and I've gone through a series of different sorts of things to get from that point. But all right.